It's 1966 on the set of The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly, and Sergio Leone has just told his entire crew to stop rolling. He walks up to Clint Eastwood, looks him dead in the face and says, "I don't think this is working anymore." Eastwood did not blink. The crew held their breath. What nobody on that set knew, Leon had already made a phone call the night before to Charles Bronson. He was ready to replace the man who would become the biggest Western star in Hollywood history. But what happened next didn't just save Clint's career. It started a war between these two men that would last 20 years and end with a death and an Oscar dedication that still makes people cry. To understand what was really happening on that set, you need to know something the history books leave out. In 1964, Hollywood didn't take television actors seriously. If you were on TV, you stayed on TV. That was the rule. Clint Eastwood had spent 6 years on a show called Rawhide, $750 an episode, playing the same cowboy week after week. No studio in Hollywood would touch him. Then Sergio Leone made one phone call and changed everything. He gave Clint the poncho, the cigar, the squint, the career, and now 3 films later, Leone wanted to take it all back. But here's the part that makes this story painful. Eastwood had no idea what Leone really thought of him. Not yet. That would come later. 5 words spoken to a reporter that Clint would never forget. It started in 1964 with a phone call Clint Eastwood almost ignored. An Italian director no one in America had heard of wanted him to fly to Spain and make a low-budget Western. The pay was $15,000 for 11 weeks of work. The script was in Italian, and Eastwood's own co-star on Rawhide, Eric Fleming, had already turned it down. But Clint was desperate for something different, so he took the job. When he landed in Spain, he met Sergio Leone for the first time. Leone spoke no English. Eastwood spoke no Italian. They communicated through a translator, hand gestures, and silence, but something clicked. Leone looked at Eastwood and saw what no one else saw. He told Clint to stop talking, stop smiling, stop acting like a television cowboy. Just stand there, squint into the sun, and let the camera do the work. Eastwood thought it was insane, but he did it anyway. A fistful of dollars made them both famous overnight. For a few dollars more made them rich. By the time they started shooting The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly in 1966, Eastwood's salary had jumped from $15,000 to $250,000, plus 10% of the box office. They were the hottest director-actor duo in Europe. But behind the scenes, the relationship was falling apart. The conditions in Spain were brutal. Eastwood and his co-star Eli Wallach shared a single hotel room and had to take turns sleeping in the one bed. Wallach nearly died 3 times during filming. Once he was almost decapitated by a train. Another time he accidentally drank acid that a crew member had poured into a soda bottle. And Leone ran his sets like controlled chaos. He would change the script overnight and expect his actors to figure it out on the spot. One time the Spanish army blew up a bridge before the cameras were even rolling because someone said the wrong word on a radio. Eastwood had come from television where everything was scheduled, scripted, and professional. This was the opposite, and after 3 films he'd had enough. But what he didn't know was that Leon had had enough too. The call to Charles Bronson had already been made. After The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly wrapped, Sergio Leone came to Eastwood with a proposal. He was making a new Western, Once Upon a Time in the West. It would be his biggest film yet, and he wanted Clint to star in it. But there was a twist. Leon didn't want Eastwood to play the hero. He wanted him to appear in the opening scene alongside Leanne Clee and Eli Wallach and get killed in the first 10 minutes. The idea was symbolic. Kill off the man with no name and everything he represented. Start fresh with a new kind of Western. Leon later explained his vision. He wanted to say farewell to those 3 characters in style and to the rules he had created with them. Van Clee wasn't available, but Wallach said yes. He thought it was brilliant. Eastwood said no. He didn't see the humor in it. He didn't want to fly to Spain just to die on screen before the opening credits finished. And more than that, he was done with Leon's way of making movies. Eastwood later explained his thinking. He felt there was no challenge for him anymore. With each film in the trilogy, he believed the focus had shifted away from character and story toward production values and spectacle. The first film had given him the most to work with as an actor. By the third, he felt like a prop in Leon's grand vision. Eastwood wasn't just rejecting a role. He was rejecting Leon's entire direction as a filmmaker. He saw Leone moving toward a David Lean style of epic filmmaking, bigger, more elaborate, more sweeping. That wasn't what Eastwood wanted. He craved stories where the character mattered, not just the scenery. Leone was furious, but he kept it to himself for now. The role of harmonica went to Charles Bronson. Once Upon a Time in the West became one of the greatest westerns ever made. It holds a 96% rating on Rotten Tomatoes to this day, and Clint Eastwood wasn't in it. A few years later, Leone tried again. He was making another western, Duck, You Sucker, and once again he offered Eastwood a role. Once again, Eastwood said no. The part went to James Coburn. That was when the silence began. For the next 18 years, Sergio Leone and Clint Eastwood did not speak. They didn't write. They didn't appear at the same events. The two men who had changed cinema together now acted as if the other didn't exist. During those years, both men built separate legacies. Leone spent over a decade crafting his gangster epic, Once Upon a Time in America, battling studios over its length and vision. Eastwood became Dirty Harry. He started directing. He made The Outlaw, Josie Wales, Pale Rider, and a dozen other films that proved he could do more than squint. But Leone wasn't silent about Eastwood, not to the press. In 1984, Leone gave an interview to American Film magazine. The interviewer asked him to compare Clint Eastwood to Robert De Niro, the star of his new film, Once Upon a Time in America. Leone's answer became legendary. He said De Niro had the ability to transform himself completely, putting on a new personality as easily as someone else might put on a coat. Eastwood, on the other hand, was like a man lowering the visor on a suit of armor. That clang, that rigidity, that was his entire character. He wasn't done. Leone said Eastwood moved through his films like a sleepwalker, walking between explosions and gunfire. Always the same, never changing. A block of marble, he called it. And then came the line that cut deepest. De Niro was an actor who could suffer on screen. Eastwood just yawned. To Leone, De Niro was an artist. Eastwood was merely a star. There was also another insult that made its way around Hollywood. Just 5 words that summed up everything Leone thought about Eastwood's range as a performer. With or without a hat, that was it. That was all Leone believed Clint Eastwood could do. 2 expressions, hat on, hat off, nothing more. When Eastwood heard what Leone had said, he didn't respond publicly. He didn't fire back. He didn't give interviews defending himself or attacking his former collaborator. He just kept working, directing his own films, building his own legacy, proving with every project that he was more than a squint and a poncho, more than a block of marble, more than 2 expressions. But he didn't forget. And for 18 years, the two men who made each other famous remained strangers. Then in 1988, something unexpected happened. Clint Eastwood traveled to Rome to promote his new film, a jazz biography called Bird about the life of Charlie Parker. It was a passion project, the kind of film no one expected from the Dirty Harry star. And while he was there, he did something he hadn't done in almost 2 decades. He called Sergio Leone. The two men met for dinner. They shared a bottle of wine, and for the first time in 18 years they talked not about the past, not about the insults, but about the future. Leone had a new idea, a television miniseries called Colt, about a revolver that passes from owner to owner across the Old West. Inspired by the Anthony Mann film Winchester 73, he wanted Eastwood to appear in the opening episode playing a mysterious gunslinger who has the gun customuled and is then killed shortly after. It was classic Leone, symbolic, operatic, subversive, and this time Eastwood didn't say no. According to those close to Leone, he knew his health was failing. He had struggled with his weight for years, and his heart had grown weak. The stress of making Once Upon a Time in America, a decadal-long battle with studios and producers who butchered his 4-hour vision into an incomprehensible theatrical cut, had taken its toll. The film had received a standing ovation at Cannes but was destroyed by American distributors. That fight had broken something. But that night in Rome, none of that mattered. 2 old collaborators, 2 men who had changed cinema together, finally made peace. They talked about working together again, about one more project, one more film, one more chance to show the world what they could do. Leone even had dreams of adapting Don Quixote with Eastwood in the title role and Eli Wallach as Sancho Panza, reuniting the three men who had made the good, the bad, and the ugly all those years ago. For one evening, the past was forgiven. 4 months later, Sergio Leone was dead. On April 30th, 1989, Leon suffered a massive heart attack at his home in Rome. He was 60 years old. He died in bed watching television with his wife, Carla. His last words to her were simple: "I feel like I'm going to faint." And then he was gone. He had been just 2 days away from flying to Los Angeles to sign the contracts for his most ambitious project yet, a $100 million epic about the siege of Leningrad during World War II. It would have been his masterpiece. Instead, it became another film that never was. Clint Eastwood did not speak publicly about Leon's death. He didn't give interviews. He didn't release a statement. He just kept working the way he always had, the way Leon had taught him to work all those years ago in the Spanish desert. But 3 years later, he did something no one expected. In 1992, Eastwood directed and starred in a Western called Unforgiven. It was a brutal, unromantic film about an aging gunfighter dragged out of retirement for one last job, a meditation on violence and myth and the cost of the lives they had both spent decades portraying on screen. Unforgiven won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. It was the crowning achievement of Eastwood's career, the film that proved he was more than a squint and a poncho, more than a block of marble, more than a man who could only act with or without a hat. And at the very end of Unforgiven, after the final scene, after the credits began to roll, 4 words appeared on screen dedicated to Don and Sergio. Don Siegel, the director who gave Eastwood Dirty Harry and taught him the craft of directing, and Sergio Leone, the man who made him a star. It was Eastwood's way of saying what he never said out loud: that despite the years of silence, despite the insults, despite the block of marble and the public humiliations, he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot who believed in him when no one else did. Sergio Leone once said that Clint Eastwood could only do 2 things: act with a hat and act without one. But in the end, Eastwood proved him wrong. He became one of the greatest directors in Hollywood history. He won 4 Oscars. He made films that will be remembered for generations. And when it came time to dedicate his masterpiece, the film that finally earned him the respect he had spent his entire career chasing, he chose to honor the man who doubted him most. That's not yawning. That's grace. Sergio Leone and Clint Eastwood only made 3 films together, but those 3 films changed everything for both of them and for cinema itself. Leone died believing Eastwood was limited. Eastwood spent the rest of his life proving he wasn't. And yet when the moment came to say goodbye, to put something permanent on screen, Eastwood chose forgiveness over bitterness, legacy over grudge. That tells you everything you need to know about the man. But here's what most people don't realize. Sergio Leone wasn't the only legend who doubted Clint Eastwood. There was another, a man even more famous, even more powerful in Hollywood, who looked at Eastwood and saw nothing but a pretender. His name was John Wayne. And what he said about Clint Eastwood was even worse than anything Leon ever said. That story is next. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you there.